from the Perennial Philosophy of Aldous Huxley, author of Brave New World. And the subject is time and eternity. It's interesting here now, the references from Consolations of Philosophy where Boethius comments on Plotinus, which is the same guy we looked at in the Untuning of the Sky, where we are looking at Boethius's, here he is, de Institutare Musica, where he discussed musica mundana, musica humana, musica instrumentalis, musica mundana, the music of the spheres. So we have the same guy we're looking at. Time and eternity. The universe is an everlasting succession of events, but its ground, according to the Perennial Philosophy, is the timeless now of the divine spirit. A classical statement of the relationship between time and eternity may be found in the later chapters of the Consolations of Philosophy, where Boethius summarizes the conception of his predecessors, notably of Plotinus. Quote, "It is one thing to be carried through an endless life, another thing to embrace the whole presence of an endless life together, which is manifestly proper to the divine mind." The temporal world seems to emulate in part that which cannot fully obtain or express, tying itself to whatever presence there is in this exiguous and fleeting moment, a presence which, since it carries a certain image of the abiding presence, gives to whatever may partake of it the quality of seeming to have being. But because it could not stay, it undertook an infinite journey of time, and so it came to pass that by going it continued that life whose plenitude it could not comprehend by staying. Boethius. Here's another Boethius quote: "Since God hath always an eternal and present state, his knowledge, surpassing time's notions, remains in the simplicity of his presence, comprehending the infinite of what is past and to come, considereth all things as though they were in the act of being accomplished." Boethius.
That's quantum, eh?
He's the same guy who writes about the music of the spheres. We're talking about Boethius.
But what he said is very much
He's our
quantum.
analyst inside this book.
It's quantum physics.
What?
It's quantum physics, what he said.
Yeah. Knowledge of what is happening now does not determine the event. What is ordinarily called God's foreknowledge is in reality a timeless now knowledge. It says that God's foreknowledge is timeless now knowledge, which is compatible with the freedom of the human creature's will in time. God's timeless now knowledge is compatible with free will. You see? That's compatible. The manifest world, and whose quote is this? Boethius, a long quote from Boethius.
Yeah.
The manifest world and whatever is moved in any sort.
I like to make a photo of that.
Hold on now. The manifest world and whatever is moved in it in any sort take their cause and order and forms from the stability of the divine mind. Thus hath determined manifold ways of doing things, which ways, being considered in the purity of God's understanding, are named providence, but being referred to those things which he moveth and disposeth are called fate. Now he's got something here, providence and fate. Providence is the very divine reason itself, which disposes all things, but fate is the disposition inherent in changeable things, by which providence connecteth all things in their due order. For providence equally embraces all things together, though diverse through infinite, but fate puts into motion all things distributed by places, forms, and times, so that the unfolding of the temporal order, being united in the foresight of the divine mind, is providence, and the same uniting being digested and unfolded in time is called fate. Now listen to this here. As a workman, conceiving the form of anything in his mind, taketh his work in hand, and executeth by order of time that which he hath simply and in a moment foreseen. So God, by his providence, disposeth whatever is to be done with simplicity and stability, and by fate effecteth by many ways and in the order of time those. You see, it's sort of like how the very things which he disposes, it's sort of like how Mozart will think of his sympathy in one thought, right? And then he executes it. The workman, the artist. Do you conceive of your art and then execute it? You don't. All that is under fate is also subject to providence. But some things which are under providence are above the course of fate, for they are those things which, being stably fixed in virtue of their nearness to the first divinity, exceed the order of fate's mobility. That's Boethius. It's quite complex reading. The concept of a clock enfolds all succession and time, and the concept the 6th hour is not earlier than the 7th or 8th, although the clock never strikes the hour save when the concept biddeth. Nicholas of Crusa. Okay, from Hobbes onwards, the enemies of the perennial philosophy have denied the existence of an eternal now. According to these thinkers, time and change are fundamental. There is no other reality. Moreover, future events are completely indeterminate, and even God can have no knowledge of them. Consequently, God cannot be described as Alpha and Omega. God is merely as Alpha and Lambda. Do you think God is Alpha and Omega, or just merely Alpha and Lambda?
Strange, I don't understand.
I don't either. And whatever other immediate letter of the temporal alphabet is now in process of being spelled out, but the anecdotal evidence collected by the Society for Psychic Research and the statistical evidence accumulated during many thousands of laboratory tests for extrasensory perception point inescapably to the conclusion that even human minds are capable of foreknowledge. And if a future finite consciousness can know what card is going to be turned up 3 seconds from now, or what shipwreck is going to take place next week, then there is nothing impossible or even intrinsically improbable in the idea of an infinite consciousness that can know now events indefinitely remote in what for us is future time. The specious present in which human beings live may be, and perhaps always is, something more than a brief section of transition from known past to unknown future, regarded because of the vividness of memory as the instant we call now. It may, and perhaps always does contain a portion of the immediate and even of the relatively distant future, for Godhead, the specious presence, may be precisely that intermedio oblis vitae tota simul e perpetuo possessio of which Boethius speaks. Seems he's a guru, Boethius. The existence of the eternal now is sometimes denied on ground that a temporal order cannot coexist with another order which is non-temporal, and that is impossible for a changing substance to be united with a changeless substance. This objection is obvious and would be valid if the non-temporal order were of a mechanical nature, or if the changeless substance were possessed of spatial and material qualities. But according to perennial philosophy, the eternal now is a consciousness. The divine ground is spirit, the being of Brahmachit, or knowledge. That a temporal world should be known, and in being known, sustained, and perpetually created by an eternal consciousness is an idea which contains nothing self-contradictory. How's it going? Finally, we come to the arguments directed against those who have asserted that the eternal ground can be unitively known by human minds. This claim is regarded as absurd because it involves the assertion, quote, "At one time I am eternal. At another time I am in time." But this statement is absurd only if a man is being of a twofold nature, capable of living on only one level. But if, as the exponents of the perennial philosophy have always maintained, man is not only a body and a psyche, but also a spirit, and if he can at will, either on the merely human plane or else in harmony. If he gets in harmony, or even in union with divine ground of his being, then the statement makes perfectly good sense. The body is always in time. The spirit is always timeless, and the psyche is an amphibious creature compelled by the laws of man's being to associate itself to some extent with its body, but capable, if it so desires, of experience and being identified with the spirit, and through its spirit with the divine ground. I guess they're talking about the mind as the psyche, obviously. So mind, body, and spirit. The spirit.
The spirit is one with the spirit.
The mind is a go-between in a way.
Mm-hmm.
The psyche, the spirit is the soul. The psyche is the mind. The body is the body. The spirit remains always what is eternally is. But man is so construed that his psyche cannot always remain identified with the spirit. In the statement, quote, "At one time I am eternal, at another time I am in time." The word I stands for the psyche, which passes from time to eternity when it is identified with the spirit, and passes again from eternity to time, either voluntarily or by involuntary necessity, when it chooses or is compelled to identify itself with the body. So you can be both timeless and in time through meditation. We were reading from Perennial Philosophy, and we shared our analysis with what Boethius was in both books as our music theorist. He's a music theorist. Very good. Did you figure out time yet? Or eternity?